Loretta, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yet another exciting year under the Gold Dome. I hear the technology industry had a really good season. Give us an overview, but be specific. Tell us about a few of the bills that concern the technology industry specifically.
Sure. So it was a fairly short session this year. They tried to wrap things up pretty quickly because of the elections coming up in an early primary on May the 20th. So there were fewer bills this year that made it through the process. Two of the bills that TAG was watching that impact the technology industry, one was the patent troll bill. And while this bill was actually put forward by the Georgia Bankers Association, it does impact software companies as well. Are you familiar with patent trolls?
Well, I'm a little bit, but I got a feeling a lot of our audience probably is not. So why don't you go ahead and go into a little bit of that?
Right. So what patent trolls are essentially are companies that operate under a false premise. They purchase patents, and then they may be similar to other patents, and then they try to seek licensing fees and legal actions against businesses who don't agree to their demands. And so essentially what the legislation that was put forth did was it created a new section under the Georgia Fair Business Practices Act. So anybody who makes, or any company that makes a bad faith assertion is then, can be challenged by a company. The reason that the Bankers Association put the bill forward is because several of their community banks had been threatened by some of these patent trolls, alleging that there was ATM patent infringement, and it seemed to stem back to one New York-based patent troll. But the technology industry was also concerned about this for a number of reasons as well. As you might imagine, there are a number of technology companies like AT&T, for example, that hold a number of patents, and it really just bogs them down in very expensive litigation as they try to challenge these folks. And so under the legislation, courts will have a little more authority to pursue these folks, and then there will be fines associated if they are found to be guilty of being fraudulent. So that was what. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think one of the other bills is the Mobile Build DLD. Is that
right? It's called the Mobile Build Act, and it's really an acronym for what's the Mobile Broadband Infrastructure Leads to Development Act. And essentially what it does is it makes it a quicker process and streamlines the process for companies, wireless companies, putting up cell towers. And it just puts some more concrete parameters around the amount of time that county governments and local governments have to approve those requests from wireless providers or mobile providers, and then it also limits the amount of money or the cost that the land can be either leased, public land can be leased to these companies, that sort of thing. So what we're probably likely to see now, this is the second year. It didn't get through last year. So it moved pretty quickly this year, though, because they did a lot of work outside of the session, working with the local governments to reach a compromise piece of legislation that everybody was happy with. And so what we're likely to see now is a number of the telecoms beginning to invest in wireless infrastructure around the state. And so as you're driving down the street, you'll no longer incur, or I shouldn't say driving and talking is not the best thing, hands-free, right? But what it will do is you won't, have as much dropout as you move about the state in various places, and there'll just be more broad coverage across the state for wireless.
Kind of a synergistic with the broadband initiative from the standpoint of the statewide, the Obama bill that was passed in 2009. I don't say they correlate with each other, but I think that there's a lot of activity going out to stretch that digital capability for a lot of reasons.
Right. And, our society and Georgia, in particular, our schools are using more technology. Clearly, our business community is using more technology, mobile technology in particular, at all levels, within a corporation, whether it's folks working, in the field offices or whether it's public safety, wireless technology is becoming fundamental to the digital economy. Exactly. Well,
you mentioned schools. Let's talk about Hope grants, and especially for not only just IT but health IT students.
Right. So Governor Deal had recognized prior to the session that we had a deficit. We have some skills gaps, clear skills gaps in our workforce, and one of them, as TAG has, and Tino Mantella, the president of TAG, has pointed up on a number of occasions, is there's about 4,000 open jobs in the health IT sector, which is a robust segment of our economy, and we have apparently in Georgia the largest health IT business community. And so the governor recognized and wanted to make it encourage folks to pursue careers in those professions, and so he put additional funding into the 2015 budget for students that are pursuing a career in health IT or information technology in general. At the same time, he increased funding for in the HOPE grants for individuals who pursue careers as welders, because we have some skilled workforce gaps as well.
Well, now, does that including the funding on the bond package that connected Georgia schools? Or is that
okay, so the bond package is a little bit separate. So the governor last year had set up a task force to make recommendations to him regarding digital technology in the classroom. And so over the course of the year, the Governor's Office of Student Achievement worked with various agencies and private companies to figure out what our needs were in the classroom in terms of technology. And so he put to the 2015 bond package a $42 million allocation to connect all of our schools wirelessly. And the positive thing about that is that Georgia already has what's called PeachNet, right, which is a broadband infrastructure that it's a loop essentially that connects all of Georgia's universities across the state. And so what they'll do is they will leverage that network already in existence and essentially drop those last lines into the various school systems across the state, and then the schools will then receive grants to connect individually to the systems.
Now, of course, there has to be a Uber bill, but I think in this particular case, literally, there was one. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So as many of our listeners and TAG's listeners know, that Uber and other software apps are really advancing on the market. And for those who don't know what Uber is, it's essentially a driving service like a taxi cab or a limousine service, right, but folks can order cars through this application, and it's becoming quite well used and well liked, particularly by younger travelers. And the taxi cab industry found them to be competitive with them, and the taxi industry and limousines are highly regulated by local authorities, and they felt like it was not a fair playing field. So legislation was introduced to try to level the playing field from a business perspective, but also from a safety perspective. And what happened was that the legislation itself created quite a robust dialogue in the legislature and outside the legislature about the role of government and regulation in our economy and regulating our businesses. Some said, well, instead of starting to regulate Uber, why don't you deregulate the taxis? Really? So it became a very robust conversation, which I think is always healthy myself when you start to talk about policy and debate the merits and the downsides as well. And then there were some provisions within the legislation that would have actually, from a technology standpoint, would have been somewhat harmful to the industry in terms of monitoring apps and how those apps can be developed and fees associated with them. And so that's where there was somewhat of a concern for the industry. And of course, the industry wants to see, technology advance and software applications advance and be unrestricted in that regard. And we saw a lot of young people candidly get engaged in this dialogue. And long story short, the legislation, did not advance. And so I think we'll probably hear more about that, in coming months. And it's a good conversation to have as we move into, as you mentioned, the 21st century economy, because this is the way we're going.
I think that's a fascinating precedent, exactly the point. I mean, you could argue that it's a somewhat of an analogy of disruptive technologies impacting any existing traditional industry. And will those industries have to be, in effect, somehow or another granted some kind of special, I mean, I can keep an open market and be competitive if technology is part of technology, is to technically evolve from the past into the whole different future. So that's going to be an interesting, I think that not only is something to watch, I'd love an opportunity to talk deeper about that particular subject as it relates even to future sessions, because I got a feeling we're going to see more of that kind of debate going on. Now, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I agree with you.
Well, thank you. Well, here's one that I think I'd be remiss in not bringing up, and that is you are running for office yourself. So tell us a little bit about that. What's the district, and what are you running on?
Yes, I am. I am actually running for State House District 54, which is a seat in the State House of Representatives in Georgia. And the district actually covers a large portion of Buckhead, the Buckhead neighborhoods, as well as neighborhoods in Brookhaven, as well as the business district, Lenox Mall, Phipps, et cetera, are also included in the district as well. And essentially my platform, I feel very strongly that, we're moving into the 21st century economy, and we can grow our economy by fostering our entrepreneurs. And I see our next wave of entrepreneurs being innovators. And so they need tools to be successful if we're going to create jobs in Georgia. So I'm spending a lot of time talking about the next generation of innovation and entrepreneurs. Also talking a great deal about education and how we prepare our children for the knowledge-based jobs of the future. And that's going to require them to not only have knowledge, but to know how to apply that knowledge to jobs that may not even exist today. In 10 years, we don't know what all those jobs will be because technology is advancing so rapidly. And so those are two of the primary topics that I talk with voters about when I'm out in neighborhoods and so forth.
It's really kind of an interesting segue, because I think everything that we've talked about today, it really requires expanded thinking and really kind of a fresh perspective, because the issues are becoming more and more challenging, and the pressure on our political leadership to have expanded mentalities enough to not only deal with the local constituencies, realistic budgets that they've got to deal with in real time, and then looking ahead to future possibilities that even require investment or out-of-the-box thinking, and then have the leadership to take the risk to stand their ground and, potentially be either reelected or not reelected based on the constituency's perspective of that information. So having someone as enlightened as you are and having such a grasp of the subjects and I think a very favorable perspective in terms of innovation, I think really bodes well for Buckhead. And I'm really excited for you. We're going to have a lot of fun watching the campaign, obviously, and all of a sudden, I guess I'm trying to think of the cliche about maybe jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, but I'm sure you're going to have a great time and be a success. So lots of luck in the race, and thank you for past information and insights that you've given us on Tech Talk, but especially for taking time out of what is a pretty busy schedule, especially now you're running for political office, for joining us today on Tech Talk.
Well, thank you for having me, and I always enjoy the conversation, and I look forward to talking with you all again in the future.